All right. Indeed, what he understands by the words faith and ethics have little to do with their common usage. For Levinas, the face is not the sum total of physical pieces, nose, eyes, ears, mouth, etc., that we present to the world. Instead, the face, as Levinas frames it, marks what is utterly other than those specific physical features. As he declared in his book, Totality and Infinity, the face is the naked and living presence of the other. Right? And notice that he always will, Levinas will always capitalize the word other when he's using it as this sort of philosophical idea, right? So it's not so much about physical characteristics, it's much more about the presence of another person, right? Or the other in general. And it's an interesting question. Is it another person or is it something else, something beyond that? So think of it this way. The highway I take to work is generally not a place for moral quandaries. That is, until I exit, stop at the first intersection, and face an ethical impasse at the underpass in the presence of panhandlers. Face. There is no better verb, if only because it is also the noun that captures what is truly at stake. I do my very best to evade these face-offs. I look at the panhandler as I might look at faces in a police lineup. I try to assess their situation, comparing the pleas on their signs with the clothing on their bodies or expressions on their faces. And yet, there she is, a human being, navigating the torrent of traffic as she slowly works the line of cars. Her cheeks are livid, her hair is unwashed, her eyes try to fix on my eyes. She wants to be seen. Will I allow myself to see her? Or will I allow the inevitable bottleneck of questions and rationalizations to come in between us before driving away? In this moment, Levinas would argue, the panhandler's real face is revealed to me. It is a face that, and this is quotation marks, that cannot be assembled like a puzzle into a recognizable type. It is a face that I cannot colonize by assigning it an identity. It is a face that, if only for a moment, shears away my own self and shoves me before my responsibilities toward humankind. It is a face, finally, that in Levinas's words, déchire le sensible, strips what is sensible and reveals what is transcendental. Right, so it gets away from the sort of
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yep.
Rabbi, sensible in French is sensitive, not sensible.
I think
yes.
What it means by sensible, right, is not sensible in the sense of, well, that's a sensible thing to do, but instead he means what can be sensed.
Yeah, but the word doesn't mean sensible in English. It's not translated as that. It's translated as sensitive.
Sensible, but what about in the noun form of it?
I'm not sure, but I've always learned that is the translation,
Yeah,
and any words around it relate to sensitive.
Yes, I mean, what I'm assuming here, I don't know French well enough to speak with any kind of assurance on these issues, is that since it's le sensible, that it has to do with like sensory.
Yeah, it could. Yes. You're right.
But it's unfortunately my phone has no coverage, so we will have to wait until. I have some. Oh yeah, we can just do it over here. Does anyone want to weigh in on this debate? I think it's a worthwhile debate. Let's see here.
We just lost the text.
Yes, we did, because I'm going to put.
I don't have any of those problems.
look,
Now we're looking at Russian.
now you look.
Oh,
because that-
no.
For some reason, my Google turned into Russian, and so I use
I'm
it.
sorry.
I use it now as. So now we're gonna translate "listensible" first into yeah. So "listensible" is
Let me look it up on my Google phone.
yeah. I'm gonna look it up right here.
Another interesting fact about French is that le visage doesn't mean exactly what we mean with face.
Oh dear.
Yeah. What does it mean? What is visage? What would be a better translation of visage?
It so corresponds perfectly to what Levinas is calling the other.
Ah,
It's a perfect image for the real meaning of the word.
that's great. Yeah. See, my French is not good enough to catch that. But yeah. So see, Google Translate will help with listen. I'm going to stick with what I said, right? So it strips what we can sense, right? What is
Yeah, it relates to the sensory, yes.
and reveals what is transcendental, right? It goes beyond our sense organs, right? And goes to something a little bit higher, so to speak. Even though I'm not necessarily comfortable with that language, but that's basically what transcendental means, right? It's sort of what I like to describe as well above my pay grade. All right, so we're going to continue. All right, so we can think of it in an even more disturbing way. Actually, before we continue, this is, the situation he is describing is not an unusual one, right? We are often faced, to use his language, right, with people who need something from us, right? We don't have any relationship with them, right? So it just gets us to that basic understanding that here is another person, the other, right? And we need to recognize at some level what our responsibility is to the other, to that person. And it's not connected to, family, friendship, religious group. It's just like it's really like the most fundamental other. All right. So we can think of it in an even more disturbing way. A group of Russian survivors of the German siege of Stalingrad watched with mounting anger as a line of captured German soldiers carried dead bodies out of a building's basement. Staring at a broken officer cradling the limp body of a young girl in his arms, an enraged woman steps from the crowd and approaches the German with a brick clutched in her hand. Rather than hitting the officer, she suddenly puts her hand into her pocket, pulls out a lump of bread, gives it to the officer, and quickly walks away. Right? So she has obviously the impulse to violence, right? But something about the situation shifts, and she gives him bread rather than smacking him. This theme, taking from Vasily Grossman's novel Life in Fate, was often cited by Levinas as an example of how the face upends our habitual state of being. At that extraordinary moment, Levinas suggests, the woman faced someone who was no longer a German officer. Here again, the sensible or the sensory, right, is stripped away and is revealed as other. A faith that constitutes all the ethics we need by revealing the vulnerability of an outsider and our common humanity. She stuns him with the bread rather than the brick, not because of who she is, but because of who he is. Crucially, this ethical stance, unlike Christian or Kantian ethics, reflects an asymmetrical relationship. We must care for others, not because we are all equal, but because we are not at all equal. It's not a case of he's not heavy, he's my brother. Rather, it's is heavy, because he's more than my brother. We move from the Cartesian, I think, therefore I am, to the Levinasian, you are, therefore I am. When faced by the other Levinas conclusion, I am infinitely responsible. In the ruins of Stalingrad, the German officer exercised what Levinas calls height over the Russian woman. Paradoxically, the woman needs the officer even more than he needs her, because his needs save her from her own self and its habit of reducing the world to her own concern. Right? I mean, just imagine, right, if she had followed her initial impulse, right, and smacked him, right, and killed him, right, that would have been worse for her in so many ways, right, than if she gave him bread. So while I pushed carts laden with dinner trays at the nursing home, I often asked myself what would change if I responded as Levinas believed I should to the height of the residents held for me. It was not an idle question. The fact that I was serving meals reflected a crisis endemic to nursing homes across the country. Rarely have so many depended on so few for so much. Since mid-March, when they locked their doors to all visitors, long-term care facilities in Texas have created the coolest of contradictions. In order to defend the physical health of their residents, the residences are damaging the residents' emotional health. Confronted with a dizzying surge in COVID-19 cases, since the start of the pandemic, some 4,000 Texas nursing home residents have died and thousands more have been infected. Administrators were understandably careful. Overnight, the word visitation had lurked from its everyday meaning of a family member coming to call to its archaic sense of divine wrath coming to afflict. But the success in stemming the pandemic's onslaught created, to use the state's own phrase, a metastasizing failure to thrive among the residents. And how could it be? At my understaffed nursing home, my coworkers struggled to meet the basic demands of the residents, cleaning and changing, shifting and shuttling, serving and supporting them, or indeed understanding them. When residents leave their rooms, they must wear masks. Their voices, already weak, are even more muffled. And their faces are partly hidden. Back in the room, though, those same faces, revealing an infinite variety of tints and textures, shapes and sizes, also remind me of my responsibilities. But how to fulfill them? Caught between the resident I was with, who alternated nibbling and yodeling, and the sight of all the trays I still had to deliver, levying a rule of infinite responsibility toward the other struck me as infinitely impractical. Still, a rule may be impractical, yet still relevant. Levinas would remind us toward the other applies not just to nursing home workers, but also to state and federal institutions. They have the same duty to residential workers that the workers have toward their residents. By increasing financial support to these residences, which operate on razor-thin margins, these authorities would help enable the residences by increasing the number and salary of their staffs to acknowledge the authority that the residents have over all of them. If, as Levinas declared, the future is the other, all have a duty toward those we are consigning to the past. All right, so I open it for comments and any thoughts. Go ahead.
Can you go back to gallery?
Yes. Just a second. There we go.
Now I have Phyllis's telephone emblazoned in the center.
Oh, my.
Any Barbara, Phyllis?
I don't know what to say. I mean, I
Yeah,
read it and she made a choice. And the choice, red was important.
or it was the alternative. There were two alternatives. One of which was revenge,
Mhm.
one of which was somehow humanity.
And how far would she get with a brick? She's not going to
knows?
get far either way.
Well, you don't know, because if there was a group of people who had all suffered through the siege of Stalingrad, and they saw this guy and somebody hit him with a brick, he might have been mobbed. But the way the way the article describes as he's carrying this child whom he helped to kill, maybe that made him more human. Because when you see a lot of the pictures of the liberated camps with German soldiers burying bodies, picking them up by the arms and legs and tossing them into a pit.
This was more human,
Well,
but more human to others who could see it.
it humanized the officer.
Yes. And it was a child.
Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, if he had been using a fire carry, he might have been clobbered with a brick.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me about that scene was that he described, at least in the article, and I tried but was not able to locate the passage in Life and Faith. I couldn't in my library. But Zaretsky, Grossman describes the officer as cradling the dead girl,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Very different than what Naomi was talking about, with grabbing people by their legs or arms. And
Well, we've all seen those videos.
go ahead.
We've all seen those videos.
Right, exactly. But I also think the other thing is that he, in a certain sense, he recognizes somehow at the last moment, um, even though he's still technically a German officer, and he's no longer in that role, right?
Yeah,
And he's been stripped of that sort of that edifice, so to speak. And he is he's still as just being another person, and that's stopped in some interesting way.
yeah. When you start thinking about, all right, she's driving through the underpass and there are 6 or 7 homeless people, each of whom is holding a sign. Are you morally responsible for all 6 or 7 of them? Or, you pick one or two, and to what extent, what do you do? Take them home? What is, you can recognize the other and you can recognize yourself as part of the other, but what is your specific responsibility in any given situation, especially since if you start taking care of these homeless people, the people in the nursing home are not going to get fed.
And that, right, especially in the context of the pandemic, right, if you stop taking care of homeless people, which is a population that has a very high rate of infection for COVID, putting people you work with at risk. When the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, I had a strong desire and a sort of a sense that it was something of a responsibility of mine to go out and join the protest. But I felt on the other hand that it was a greater responsibility of mine not to do that, uh, fear of the virus and then being a danger.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the norm also? Is how far outside, and of course the norm is a variable anyway, but how can you deal with all this? Whereas she was recognizing a situation as it was and making a choice from the heart, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I also think what is what's distinct
It's
about.
hard to hear you, Rabbi.
I think what's also interesting about the two examples that he brings, right? The example of the homeless people on one hand, and the example of the people in the nursing home who are that are understaffed and who are underserved, right? Is that these are also uh, larger problems, right? And they're larger
Yeah.
Yeah.
problems, which I think somehow makes the comparison to the officer story not. I don't feel that they're quite equivalent, right? Because it's very clear, right, that the power of the German officer story is part because the Russian woman sort of was in a newly powerful situation, right? There had been this reversal where the Germans had been attacking and besieging and killing, right? Now, because the city had withstood and the Russian army had defeated them, now the woman was in a position to kill an officer, which she wouldn't have ever been in that. So that sort of case of the in the case of the there's not the necessary enmity uh, between uh, between him and the homeless people, or between him and the residents. There's just a sense of overwhelming need that no one person can. Uh, and so it seems to me that the answer that he comes to at the end of his article, right, that the only thing that the individual can do is do as much of the work as he can, but to advocate for greater resources so that there are more people to do that work.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that that's the same answer people under, right? Is that an individual is not going to take all of those people home, right? But there's societal imperative to take care of the underprivileged others. Um, where exactly that goes is not clear.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a nursing home ombudsman. It was more than 20 years ago, but I've worked to assuage, I guess the word be, individual problems of individual residents, where the great social picture at the time was that in anticipation of increased Medicaid reimbursements, various corporations were buying up nursing homes. The anticipated increases did not take place, with the result that you got a lot of nursing homes that had problems. So in this situation, fine, I could help a few individuals, but there wasn't a hell of a lot I could do about the entire uh, corporate economic situation.
I had a situation when I was 21 and I was a caseworker. How do you handle that? And I had two chances. First time in Jersey City, I was young and I was naive and I didn't know too much. Second time around, I was more professional. I would look not at the person, but at the situation and try to resolve a situation to some form of acceptability. So I think you need to step back and try to solve the problem that possibly can be abated. Like, Rabbi, you have this situation every day.
Yeah. No, Barbara, I think that's a very helpful way to look at it, right? That that pay attention to the visage, right? To the face of the other, and recognize your responsibility in regards to that. It is not the same as necessarily you overcoming, you know, possible obstacles to help every single person that you encounter, right? It's more about pushing you to take the broader perspective and to look beyond yourself, right? To sometimes that involves an individual encounter with someone. Sometimes, as Barbara says, it's about trying to figure out what the situation really is and making that particular situation better, without necessarily getting caught up in, you know, one thing or another.
Does this get us back to the old one who saves a life? It is as if they had saved the world.
Right, and one who,
Get us into theology.
right, this is the old, that's, from piercing a boat, right? That a person, like, in it goes both ways, right? Going back to the story of Cain and Abel, I think that, a person who kills somebody destroys an entire world worth of people, but also vice versa, right? So sometimes, and also the other thing from piercing a boat, right, which I'm sure Levinas was very, very clearly aware of, right? Which is that you're not required to finish the work, but you're also not allowed to completely.
Yeah, to abandon it. Yeah.
So you do what you can humanly do, um, and save yourself for the next day, right? Make sure that you.
Yeah.
Where did you find this article, Rabbi?
Also in the Times.
Oh.
It was,
Then I missed it.
I thought it was just. It struck me that this was a helpful way. I mean, I just think also that it's so evocative. Right?
Yeah.
A situation where if we see people, we very often see only their face, and we see nothing else. And so the importance of the face becomes magnified in a way that, or it becomes inescapable in a way that it might not be so much in pre.
But the face is only the presentation of the personality. There's a person behind that face, and that other is implied in the French meaning of the visage, which is not so implied in the English meaning of the face.
Well, I think that's what's so interesting about it, Phyllis, because I think that now that we, again, and this is something that as someone who uses the phone, this is not so much part of your reality, but what I see of, especially people not at CC, but in my other congregation, I see their face.
Yeah.
That has to does have to sort of stand for the full otherness of their being. I mean, it's really interesting how it kind of that way.
But you can only see kind of the shadow of their face, because the fleeting twinkle in their eye or drop of tear or whatever, or just a twitch of their face. You don't see in when you look at their faces on the screen.
It's different, right? Especially like right now, I'm noticing that the way that my camera is that when I'm talking, I want to see, if I want to look at the screen, what you guys all see is the bottom of my mask. And Amy, for whatever reason today, she's got the beautiful picture of the tree in front of the old devotion house. But Naomi, your face is very, very blurry. So it's only like a very
Right.
Well, that's 21st century technology for you.
so Barbara's face is actually pretty clear today.
But the what I'm trying to say and is that the even when you're actually confronting a face in real life, so not in the world of visual technology, but when we don't think of the face the same way. So for the French word, what's implied is that the face is just kind of the exterior version of personhood.
Right. It's like visage in English almost, right?
Yeah.
You mean flat rather than you don't see the
No,
depth?
not flat. It's not a visual thing. It is visual, but it's a visual representation of what's inside the person.
A two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional thing.
Yeah, you could put it that way, but it's more than that. I mean, it's well, never mind. Other is a perfect translation.
It's a fascinating question of translation, and sort of cultural, a little bit of a cultural mismatch.
Yeah.
But it's also, and the thing I don't, what I'd be fascinated to learn more about this, right, is that it's also very, this word faith is important in Bible, right? The way that Moses talks in another is panim el panim, right? Face to face. That is contrasted, right, with the way that all the other prophets are given in the kingdom of God. Right? Where it sort of supposes, although the Bible is always completely clear on this, but it sort of one supposes that it's more of a one-way street of communication, that God can kind of communicate to the prophet, but it's not necessarily always quite in the other direction. So there is in Hebrew, and I wonder for Levinas what side was his visage more of the French that Phyllis is describing, or is it more of the Hebrew, right, which is about this deep intimacy? I just wouldn't know from the little that I know about this, but I think it's a fascinating question.
Can I bring up something slightly different? There are a few words, and right now I can just think of two that we're hearing now. One is the word authentic, and the other one is going forward. And both of those are positive, but how? If you mean authentic versus not authentic, and going forward versus going backwards or staying the same. But these are new buzzwords that came more heavily with the masking and the virus. And you hear many people using them. And it was like my original issue with basic sociology years ago. I'm fine, I understand it, but why do I have to use these terms?
Those are two terms that I have to say, Barbara, you found two of the terms that I find most problematic. Going forward, just, you know, in part because in my experience, it's just
Louder.
in the future. Uh,
Barely
Yes.
hear you.
Yeah, Rabbi, you're talking upward.
Going forward, the phrase going forward, it seems to imply just in the future. And so I always am wondering, why do we need to say going forward?
Exactly, to me.
Um, because because that does seem to set up a somehow that just moving into the future is the same as progress, which is not. It's just that it's the future. And so going forward, we can go backwards. They don't contradict one another. And authentic is also, I find, a very the way it's used now.
Yes.
Is I find that it's very often doublespeak. Um, we're talking about authentic Mexican food or something like this. Which everybody everyone who makes Mexican food, right, has their own definition of authentic, and so um, it becomes a way of sort of uh, uh, I'm trying to think exactly what I'm trying to say, but that it that by claiming that something is authentic, you're implying that something else is not authentic. Uh,
Exactly. It has the reverse connotation. Well, this is good, but those are not. And I'm sure there are a couple of other things that I can't recall now, but yeah, it was kind of, you hear it. And I've heard it from people on Zoom too.
yes, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, can I just tell Phyllis something? I got a
Sure.
phone call, Phyllis,
Yep.
and I don't know whether you got it because you're on the phone now, but about the flu vaccine. Did you
Oh,
hear
yeah.
about it?
No. What about it?
Good. We got a call, either press 1 or press 9. This was from Jill. It was a recording saying if you want to get a shot, it'll be here Wednesday, I think, in the afternoon or Wednesday, but you have to
Oh,
call in to get it. Okay, Phyllis?
okay. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, well,
And of
I
course,
wanted to do it while I still remember.
they made this long, long phone call in the middle of two programs that they
Yes,
Yes,
right.
true,
conflict with each other.
true that.
That's why I had to mute myself for several minutes because my phone answering system responds to lower the volume. So,
When I have to get up and walk over, which is an issue sometimes.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, can I get back to Barbara's word authentic? So there are two opposites of authentic, depending on what you're thinking of at the moment. One opposite could be false, but the other opposite can be imitation. So something is
Right,
an
correct.
imitation or not authentic. And imitation is not the same thing as false.
Right.
Yeah.
Although I do think that sometimes those two distinct meanings of authentic are actually they get combined, right? To take my very holy metaphor of Mexican food, right?
Yeah.
That that an imitation of Mexican food, right? So say I cook a taco, right? Clearly it's not Mexican food in the sense that I'm not in Mexico and I don't have Mexican ancestors. So in that sense, it's imitation.
Right.
But very often when people use authentic, um, or inauthentic, right? It means that somehow it's actually false. There's actually there's something negative about
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
not being Mexican food that I dare to call it Mexican food.
For example, a
Right,
pocketbook would be an authentic Louis Vuitton,
right.
where, excuse my accent, whereas one that's not is false.
It's piracy, right?
Yeah.
Well, that we can use whatever term.
Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so these are things that are like, well, I don't have enough to do, so these would not annoy me, but that's what I have. And I have a lot of books to read soon and maybe and whatever. But anyway, this has been interesting.
All right, well,
Mm.
I'm just thinking about the word natural.
yes.
Yeah,
Seems
right.
Oh, that's a
That's another.
talk about a great marketing word that's almost completely meaningless, but
All natural.
yeah.
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
it does seem to be an effective word um, in terms of selling. So, we're all susceptible to that. So,
But to circle back around, it's natural about concern, care, identification, whatever with the other.
Mm.
Natural to us as humans.
see that last sentence again, Naomi?
What is natural to us in terms, what is natural as humans, uh, parenthesis, behavioral terms?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very important question, right? Because there's in our current political climate, right? There's so much of an emphasis on uh, on uh, on sort of debating or arguing or just yelling about what is our responsibility to quote unquote ourselves, meaning which I think in this case means people are into us, people that are like us, right, as opposed to responsibility to each other. And how do we choose which category people fall into, or which people fall into which category? And for instance, this was a very interesting part of. I think we may have even discussed this at some point. Trevor Noah, in his book Born a Crime, describes the situation of race in South Africa, whereas Chinese people were black and Japanese people were white.
Oh God.
Well,
And
but all right, if they weren't black or colored and they didn't fit into either category and there was no other category, there they were.
right,
Can I
that's funny.
can I say something else?
Yeah,
Two things. First of all, I tend to see these issues in the form of a flower because I'm visual that way. And the other thing is, people say this all the time, and Rabbi, you had a riff on it. That's a good question. Well, the converse is, well, why would I want to ask a bad one?
Oh yes, right.
I started getting, because I've heard everybody in the staff, or not everybody, and I notice it. I think it's more on women who do that. And of course, I can base that on absolutely nothing, except I've heard one or two women say it often or occasionally.
right.
I'm lowering it. I'm lowering the bar on that, and that's another
Well,
one.
it's become a euphemism.
Well, right,
Because,
and I have a hackle that rises with that one.
yeah, but the person to whom the question is addressed, especially if it's in some kind of public forum, cannot say that is the stupidest question I've ever heard, or didn't you hear what I said 15 minutes ago, which answers your question? He has to say, or she, oh, that's a good question. Yes.
And you can't say that's buying time not to tell the truth. Maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
that's going further, but
yes.
Right,
Yes.
we're buying time to try to figure out what am I.
exactly. That's probably better. Buying time how to figure out to dodge it, or
Yeah.
a lot of permutations on that.
Yeah.
What's the good?
Or yeah, if it actually is a very good question, which you'd rather not answer.
Yeah.
God, this phone is going to make me crazy now.
Well, better you. Maybe it's not for us then, I guess. Meanwhile, I guess, Rabbi, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Rabbi. See you next week.
Yeah, you had a small group, but it was better, as I said,
Yeah.
then,
Okay.
oh, can you hear this noise outside of 9?
I can
the
hear the
ninth
noise
floor?
outside of my apartment.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
drilling.
You're right under me.
Oh,
And
boy.
yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
that was,
Anyway,
Okay.
thanks for everybody.
Thank
yeah,
Bye.
you.
thank you,
Bye.
thank you.
Sure.
See you around, whatever.
Bye.
Right. Come on. There it is. Sorry, Jane, this is very complicated for me.